The Harley Reid talk is really starting to heat up when it comes to Richmond, so I thought it was time to revisit that conversation a little bit. Cal Toomey recently did mention that we were well and truly in the race for him, which confirmed what we'd been saying a couple of weeks ago. And then last night on Big Footy, on one of our trade threads, a poster from Carlton, username C4-2YoDor. Now, he wrote that you're all over Harley Reid. Now, I'll put the comment up here. On the surface, people might think, yeah, that's just some random on Big Footy. But for those who have been around Big Footy long enough will know that C4 is one of the absolute elite in terms of trade intel and has been doing this for a very, very long time. A+++ in terms of his history and getting stuff right from all different clubs. He's got a lot of stuff right for Port Adelaide as well, which is a bit of a random one. So I don't know his exact background, but what I do know is his information's usually pretty bang on. Now, C4's not saying that we are going to land him. He's just saying that we're well and truly in the hunt, as is, I think, Geelong, Cal Toomey mentioned the other day as well. So this really confirms what Grok and Tiggs have been hearing as well, that we are right up into our eyeballs for Harley Reid. Now, I still know that that's going to divide a lot of people. I myself even made a post last week, which kind of backfired a little bit. At halftime last week, Harley Reid was on about 6 disposals and playing like an absolute bum. And I put out there in the universe that I'm in the no camp for him. Then, of course, he has a ripper second half and makes me look like an idiot. But last night, again, didn't have the greatest of games. His attitude's a bit stinky. And I know that, it may be because he's checked out. He doesn't want to be there. There's not much leadership. I get all that. I just can't help but feel, comparing what he's doing to what Dan Rioli did with us when he was leaving, he put out a best and fairest quality year for us. That's the kind of attitude I want to see from a player that we may potentially give up 2 first-round picks for. And I know he's younger and all that kind of stuff, and people will make the comparisons to Horne-Francis. I don't like what he did either. I thought that was still equally as poor. But obviously he's playing well for Port Adelaide, and that's the hope that you would get for any club who's willing to trade for Harley Reid. I suppose the big question mark is all about what are you willing to give up? And like we've mentioned earlier, I feel like the West Coast might legitimately start the conversation with 3 first-rounders, which will get laughed at. He's just not justifying it at the moment, because currently, with the form that he's in, it's all based on potential and the hope that if he was to return to Victoria, that his attitude would change because he's back home, like what Horne-Francis did going to Port Adelaide. There's no guarantees there, though, and there's no guarantees with draftees either. So I get that there's risk on both fronts, but I guess it's, are we comfortable enough to hand over potentially 2 first-round picks for someone who may or may not improve the attitude? If he does improve his attitude and his work rate, he's going to be a gun. There's no two ways about it. He's going to be a star. We don't have that guarantee. A draftee, on the other hand, you bring in, they're going to be enthusiastic, they're going to buy into what you're doing, and they're going to try and put their best foot forward. Will they be of the same quality as Harley Reid? Probably not. Looking at this year's draft, to be honest, and I know it's early days, nothing's really wowed me in terms of a player type that we need. We probably still need that outside running class. And I know Grill's in there, who's one that we're going to keep an eye on, but there's not much else that's really lighting the world on fire for me. And that's where the appeal of Harley Reid is still there, I think. And like we've said previously, the club do feel that pairing up Reid and Lawler is a generational midfield. And if Reid gets his act together, they're probably spot on. So maybe they are prepared to take the gamble. Like I said, though, on a previous video, if we are to seriously enter the trade stage of a deal for Harley Reid, we won't part ways with our 2 first-rounders this year, I don't believe. I think we would part way with one and then trade a future, which still makes things interesting because in 2026, we obviously need quite a few picks for some NGAs and some father-sons. This year, we need some picks back because we've got Louis Callaway as a father-son. But I think as a net result, if you could walk away from this year's draft and trade period with a Harley Reid and someone like a Grill as an under-18 midfielder, I think that's a good result. I think you take that every day of the week, as long as the Harley Reid you're getting is last year's Harley Reid and one with an improved attitude and work rate. And look, it's no secret there's a little bit of self-implosion going on at West Coast, and maybe that's lending to how he's sort of acting and performing. But I would just love him to put together... Well, it's really difficult. I'm kind of confused now because on one hand, him playing like this, in my mind, he's actually decreasing his own value both for West Coast and for himself. Because people are a little bit less likely to go and pay on potential, although we probably still would for a player like Harley Reid, but maybe not to the level that we would be asked to. if he was putting out 25, 30 disposal games week in, week out. So it's a really interesting predicament. Keen to hear everybody's thoughts. Are you in the Harley Reid camp or not? I know people are going to say, based on what they've seen so far, that they're a no. But let's ask the question two different ways. What would you be prepared to give up to get the Harley Reid that we're seeing right now? Maybe you wouldn't want him at all, potentially. I don't think I'd want him at all if he's going to come across like he is. But if we can get the Harley Reid across that we know the superstar he could be based on his draft footage, his late games last year, what would you be happy to give up? And do you think it's a good fit? I think his age is a good fit. Obviously, the big sticking point will he want to come to us? And you know what? I was thinking about this last night, and it might not be as hard of a sell as what people may realise. And it could take a little bit of creativity from Blair and the team. But if you think of it like this, you can be part of a Richmond resurgence, coming through with these young kids to bring the club back up, playing in front of big crowds at the MCG. You're going to be playing with Lawler and Smiley and Houghton and Jonty Fall, Luke Traynor, all that, which no doubt they would have to play a part in, I reckon, to try and get him across in terms of speaking to him. But there could be the genuine appeal there of coming through with a rising young club back to a strong contender. And like I've said before, potentially ladder position is not so much the issue, but more about culture, making sure there's people in the right places and showing they've got a winning mentality. And I think if you look at how we're playing this year compared to how West Coast and Kangaroos are playing this year as examples, I think we're showing a bit more in that space. I think we're showing a bit more of a hard edge. We're showing a willingness to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Even though we don't always get the result, we're showing that we're not giving up. And I think that's a really important thing and a somewhat attractive prospect if you were to come to a lower ranked team. Now, the obvious risk is maybe he wants to hang around at West Coast for one more year and then try and get to a Geelong or a Hawthorn, someone who's contending, which I can completely understand as well. If you're West Coast, though, this is where it gets interesting for them. If you're West Coast, if you know that Harley Reid wants out, you're pushing him out the door this year because we have the best draft capital to appease them and can well and truly compensate them and him financially. So if he was to want to stay for another year, I think it's actually going to hurt West Coast more, and I don't think they're going to want that. But it all depends on Harley Reid buying into wanting to come to our club if we're as interested as it's all being reported that we are. So a lot to play out, obviously. We are only in May. But yeah, a bit of a watch this space. Keen to see how it all plays out and keen to get all of your thoughts in the comments below on Harley Reid. Do you want him? Do you not want him? Let us know. And yeah, let's see how this one plays out.